to the degree that you want something is the degree you're afraid of not having.
Yeah. God, I wish I started when I was younger. I go, well, yeah, but you didn't. So shut the fuck up and let's keep going.
Right.
Like you can't.
Nobody changes until they change their energy. And when you change your energy, you change your life. Because it's not till then that it's really real.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is way worse than I thought. It's like, oh yeah, it's way, way worse than you thought.
Yeah.
But luckily there's more to you than you think.
Harry, it's a pleasure to sit down with you, man.
Man, thank you, Aubrey. It's good to be here. You're in
sure.
Venice,
Right? I'm here often.
California.
I know, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I'm out here every 8 weeks or so. Yeah, it's got so many people out here and just so many different, interesting, cool people to connect with. That's really the thing that draws me back over and over again. It's just, for whatever you might say about LA, like there's a lot of really cool people here.
Yeah. It's a mixing pot, man. I mean,
It
everybody's from everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
you know, East Coast, West Coast, Europe, South America. I mean, this is just a big mixing pot of folks coming in, man, to enjoy the weather, enjoy the people, enjoy the opportunities.
Yep.
So welcome to Cali, brother.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Well, you have a lot of different awards and credentials and accomplishments, and that's great to see. But I have to say, man, I mean, from the moment you walked in the door, all of that can go out the window because you gave about the best hug of a human being that I've met in a long fucking time.
Yeah,
so
man.
that counts a lot more to me.
That's from my bear lineage. Seriously.
Then all the doctorates and your Obama fellow and your CNN hero. I mean, it is impressive though what you've been able to accumulate. What do you think? Attributes to all of that, recognition, where a lot of people don't get that kind of recognition that you've gotten?
I mean, I think it's just you step on your path, and you know it's your path.
Mm-hmm.
You know what you stand for. You know you've done the work. And you're there. You're honing in constantly. I think that life and the work is much like a refinement, right? We're constantly tuning the radio. We're in Carlos Castaneda's Separate Reality, where that assemblage point, right? We're constantly finding where we're off, where we're on, and we're bringing it back. And I think I've done a lot of work on myself.
It shows, right? I mean, like the reconciliation of those extraneous forces is what allows you to be so radically present. Like presence is a thing that doesn't come easily. You can fake it, maybe make eye contact, but you can tell with behind those eyes, the brain is swirling around and thinking about other things and
all
worrying
these
about
universes, man.
Yeah, exactly. But when you can narrow that down into like really radical presence, it's almost like you plant that Gandalf staff in the ground and say, I am here, I am here, I am here.
That's it, brother.
That's it. And so it's not surprising to me that you've gotten that recognition, because I'd be like, I don't know, do I have any awards? Can I look at my trophy case? What can I give Harry? I'm sure he deserves it.
No, I don't look, man. It's like I don't think many of us look for these type of recognition.
Sure.
They're there. We see them. They go on a shelf. We keep doing the work.
Yeah.
Like we get back out there. We meet the people that these awards come with, and amazing human beings. But you keep on doing the work. Like the work is what's important. I'm here to be of service. Period.
Yeah.
Like that's it. Like I know that about myself. I know that I'm here to serve humanity. I know I'm here to serve my community. And like, that's what I wake up in the morning thinking. That's what I go to bed thinking about every single day, because it fulfills me. It is exactly what I wanted when I didn't know I wanted it. When I was a kid and I was struggling, I'm looking around and I'm wondering, what am I going to do with my life one day? And there was something always behind me, something like what felt like, and you can probably, attest to this. Like it felt like a freight train. There's something there. You can't put your finger on it.
Mm-hmm.
What is that thing? And then one day when you're not even paying attention, it just shows up in the mirror. You look and there it is. And you're like, okay, this thing's on now. For me, I was homeless, man. And it wasn't until being homeless and someone walked past my tent and asked me, "Hey man, you live there?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I do," you know? That I realized that I'm on the other side of it, that I'm hidden, that I'm at a new place in my life.
Yeah.
And then I was there to do the work. I wasn't there to hang out. I wasn't there just to kick it, you know? I was there to do the work. And I went to work and I went to work. So I
How old were you when you were homeless?
27.
Wow. And that was pre getting your doctorate. It was pre all of that. So tell us about that transition. I also want to circle back and talk about how important it is to have purpose. I've just been reading a lot of Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, and it's so integral to so many aspects of, you know, psychological development, which is the field that you got your doctorate in. But tell us a little bit about that journey, because a lot of people at 27, homeless, thrown in the towel, you know, you would assume that that's the way that a lot of people would perceive it, that this is just a task of such enormity that what am I going to do? But you must have had a different take on it.
Yeah, I'd already been struggling with it in the first place. It was just I got to a place in my life where it was like, you just gotta let go, bro. You just gotta let go. You know, I had gone through a divorce. You know, I have 2 older children. They're older. You know, I've got 5 now. I got 5 kids total now. But my 2 kids, I had been doing poorly financially. I was trying to look for work, couldn't find work. There was like every door I could think of was closing on me, all over the place. And I had an apartment in Pasadena, and you know, I was about to get evicted. And before I got evicted, I just said, you know what, guys, I'm gonna go. And all I had was a tent, you know, and I had my friends calling me, "Hey bro, come sleep on my couch." And I had done that before. I had been there before. I said, "No, man, I need to go face this." You know, and I was thinking of Nina Simone's Cinnamon song, you know, "Cinnamon, where you gonna run to?" And, you know, there's a part in the song where you get to the devil, right? And you got to look the devil in the face, and then you just laugh, you know?
Damn, that's fucking inspiring. Damn, Harry.
You know what I mean? And you get there and you're just like, and you're like, you know, and you just go there.
Yeah.
And it was in that moment where I was like, all right, I got my tent, I'm going, you know, and I wanted to go to the beach, man. I connect with the water. I'm a double Pisces, right? So I want to connect with the water.
Shit, I don't know if I'm a single or a double. I don't know. I don't even know.
Sun and moon in Pisces.
Shit, I got to do some astrology. I'm a Pisces.
When's your birthday?
February 28th.
Okay, I'm March 12th. All right. Right there, man. We're right there. And so, you know, I get there and time goes on. There was only one other friend of mine who knew I was there, you know, and she checked up on me from time to time. And there was finally a moment where it was just time to go. And she said, "Well, you know, what are you going to do?" I said, "Well, I'm going to, I've been having this reoccurring dream of me, you know, alone in a motel room down some dusty highway with, you know, this blinky sign, and it's just me in this room by myself. You know, I'm out here on this beach by myself. There's surfers, there's people that walk by, there's birds, there's nature, but there's no real solitude here. You know, I need solitude. I need to go in, you know?" And so she said, "What do you want to do about that?" I said, "Well, I need to find this place. I don't know where it is. I just keep dreaming about it." She says, "Okay, well, how about I help you?" I said, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Well, let's go find it." And she said, "Once we find it, I'll pay for you to be there for 30 days. And, you know, you go figure whatever it is you need to figure out." And I said, "Okay." And I had been writing poetry. I'm a poet, so I was writing poetry and I was reading, and I had, you know, my stack of books, you know, that I had in my backpack, you know, and I had my cans of food that I had taken out there with me all those months. And we finally jump on the road later that day. There's a much longer part of this where it just gets really kind of crazy and weird. There was actually a homeless woman who during that day had come and confirmed for me that I need to be alone in a room by myself, later on that night. There was a bunch of weird stuff.
Those winks from the divine are pretty interesting when you're really guided towards a certain path, huh?
Little breadcrumbs.
Little breadcrumbs, yeah. Breadcrumbs when you're starving, too.
I know,
You're
like,
look, I mean, normally I might ignore this, but right now I'm so hungry. Like, I cannot ignore this.
And so we went up to 5 and we kept getting off on exits. And I'm like, wait, it's this exit. She's like, is it? I'm like, no, it's not. Get back on the freeway. And we're driving for like 2-3 hours up the 5 freeway. And we finally get off on, I don't remember the name of the road, but we got off and we made a right and we made a left and we made another right. We made another left. And sure enough, a motel that resembled this thing I was having in my head over the last 6 months, like finally was like right there. And so we went to the grocery store. We loaded up with all non-perishable foods, loaded up the cart. She went and paid for me to be there for all that time. Mm-hmm. And then she comes in, drops off the groceries. She leaves, closes. I close the door. I turn around the TV. I lock the door. I threw the phone under the bed. And that became my incubator. That became my sanctuary for 30 days.
Wow.
And I didn't leave there. And that's why one thing I knew I needed more than anything was I needed to have discipline. Like my discipline was just out of whack. So I right away put together a schedule of how I'm going to spend my day. I wake up in the morning and I shower or bathe, I meditate, I read, I write, I eat, I read again, I meditate, I do a little bit of calisthenics and I, some push-ups and work out a little bit. And then I go back to bed and I did that and I stayed on that schedule every single day, all that time. And in that room, there was a quarter that I had a quarter. And with that quarter, I'd drawn a circle and I was hearing this word, new earth, new earth, new earth. So I wrote the word down, new earth. And then I used the quarter to draw what is our logo now, this man stretched out with his arms wide, and I drew that, and then I began to write the plan for how I was going to live out the rest of my life, which was to serve the community. Mm-hmm. So I wrote that, and after about 30 days, she showed up and she said, "Is it time to go yet?" I said, "It's time to go." And the plan was to first go to the community and have a conversation about this first. It wasn't like I'm going to just introduce it. So I started an open mic a year later in my community, and it was a community open mic that wasn't really an open mic. It was an intentional space where people came to artistically open up, release, and write poems on their on the social activity around town, themselves, police, government, everything, all into a piece. So you had 4 minutes on the mic to talk about what's happening in your life, peel away layers, transform yourself. And we did this for 3 years, and it was at a cafe that held 40 people, but 110 people would show up every single Monday, Amazing. And I had speakers out in the parking lot and everything. People were showing up and expressing themselves. And in that room, we formed our first board for the organization. That was in 2003, 2004. And then we began our first program, which was servicing and bringing poetry and spoken word and music programs to kids that were incarcerated. There weren't many at that time. Like there were a few, but there weren't many. And then once that started, we saw that, there was a lot of attraction. A lot of kids came to it. And then there was also the fact that, this is a great program in jail, but when they're coming out, there's also that gap. Yeah. And that's when we began to do more of a makeshift case management. I wasn't a case manager then. I didn't have a doctorate even then. I just know I need to help these kids because I've been to 9 funerals so far, right? And who's going to stop these deaths? Who's going to stop these kids from hitting these streets like this and losing their lives? Well, somebody's got to do it. Guess I'm going to do it. I've been in living rooms where I'm breaking up fights between kids and parents. It's just like whatever we got to do to keep you out of jail is what's important right now.
So when you talk about finding your meaning and finding your purpose, they recommend that it's something that's personally meaningful to you, something that really touches you personally? Because there's a lot of things you can do in a community, but you were attracted to the kids, and particularly the kids who are going into juvenile systems and going into incarceration and then coming out. What was it about that? What was it about that really drew you into that kind of field? Did you feel like that was the area that you could most help, or was there some personal story or some kid that you knew that really kind of drew you that way?
I was born on the south side of Chicago. I spent 5 years on juvenile probation. I was a teenage dad. I didn't have any mentors. It's something that I longed for. It's something that I know I had to begin to address, within myself.
Sure.
These kids helped me to see those gaps in my own life and those areas in my past that were just empty. I just wanted to be closer to it. I wanted to be closer to the understanding, myself, and at the same time understanding them and supporting them. It was like they're my tribe.
It's almost like you created, the solution that you would have wanted for yourself.
Yeah.
Which is a great way to do it, right? Like if you think about all right, how could I serve the younger version of me? That's going to be something that's personally meaningful to you and something that you're going to have experience with, because you can go back in your own memory bank and be like, what would have been awesome if I had back then? Well, some mentor that I could go, bring my poetry or my songs to, or my art to, or share my stories with, and then a community where I could share that with the community at large and be heard, and that's.
I think about it all the time. I'm like, God, if I had this,
right?
Right. If I had this, it's like a lot of the kids that we work with, they get irritated. Like, you guys are caring too much, It's like, I wish I had someone like, we're gonna just anything you need,
Uh-huh.
We lift kids all over town, man. We do. I mean, there's so much that we do to support them, because in order for them to really have that support, right? There needs to be people right there, right? Mm-hmm. There needs to be someone accompanying them through this journey, and not people telling them what to do. Nobody wants to be told what to do. You don't like to be told what to do. No one likes to be told what to do.
Doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
So it's like folks that are going to listen, folks that are going to be there, folks that are going to say, okay, I care, and then guide you in that direction, bring up suggestions. Also just create sort of a smorgasbord of different activities and programs that you can get involved with. And there's not a one size fits all sort of protocol for this. This is about, giving an understanding, having an understanding, giving them the opportunity to have voice in the first place, to say, hey, here's what I need, which is so hard for all of us to do.
And if the thing is, when you're really trying to help somebody, if they can't see themselves in you at all,
right,
it's going to be really hard to listen. If somebody's just coming in like, I'm here to help. Yeah. And they're like, you don't fucking know me. You've never been in a situation like this. So it's not that it's not possible. It is. And some people will adopt to that and be like, well, look, this person's really caring and they may not understand me through personal experience, but their heart's in the right place. And that can work, but it's a lot more powerful when it's someone like yourself who's grown up facing those similar conditions. And you even had a stint in incarceration, right? I mean,
when I was 16.
Yeah. So you've been there.
Yeah.
And they can see that, and you're talking to them like, yeah, I've been where you are, and that's so fucking powerful.
Yeah, it's pretty much gives you that allowance to operate, right? It gives you that allowance to come in and work with them. They know that you've been there. They can see it. I mean, let's forget about what you've done and all that. They know it.
Yeah.
You walk in the door, they know who's been through it. They know, they can look into your eyes and say, hey man, you've been there. Mm. We have you see it all the time in the juvenile halls, the different programs that come in and out. You see the kids are like, so resigned with certain programs that come in and they can't reach them. Like, why can't I reach them? Well, man, you give them some time, but they know that, you're trying to change them.
Yeah.
And, it's not about changing anybody, it's about accepting everybody, accepting them and allowing them to express themselves, allowing them to discover what that expression for themselves is, and when you give that room, only thing that's present is love. Like, that's it. And love is what makes it all possible. Like, without that, none of it would work. No one transforms. No one even listens unless there's love present, and unless you're interested in hearing and in learning and growing, And if you're not, you're just going to walk away. You're like, oh, this ain't for me.
Yeah.
And so
it's strange that people still underestimate love.
Yeah.
It's like, it's the funniest thing. It's like, love isn't going to solve anything. I'm like, really?
It solves everything.
I think you might have it backwards. Like, sure, there's a lot of things that need to be done too, but do it with love. And it's just going to be so much more powerful, because that's the thing that genuinely heals.
Well, love's been so convoluted, right? Like, the whole idea of love,
Right.
and that's where it is. I mean, folks, when they say love, they hear another thing. They hear relationship. They hear pain sometimes as well.
Sure. Love hurts is one
hurts.
of the great lies that we've all been told.
Yeah.
It's not the love that hurts. It's maybe your fear of losing that love, your attachment to that love, your ego that's wrapped up in the validation that comes from that love. All of that stuff can hurt, and I get it. And love may trigger that, but it isn't the love that hurts.
No.
Never.
That's your story.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Unravel that story,
Mm-hmm.
And life is a story, you know what I mean? Like, all of it's constantly happening. And so if love is not the word that works for you for that energy, choose another word,
or clean that word off, or take it to the car wash and scrub off all that bullshit.
Yeah. Because a lot of people's got, they got all kind of shit on it, man. They got mud, they got concrete, they've got the whole world, they've got trees. And I mean, they've smashed it.
I think no two words have had more stuff put on it that doesn't fit than the words love and God.
Yeah.
Like two of the most foundationally important words in our entire lexicon that mean the most important things, perhaps even synonyms, depending on how you look at it, right? But those words are they're tough to use because people have all of these stories, like you said, just stories around them. And I think one of the jobs that any philosopher has, or anybody who's trying to teach or lead, is just to do your best to scrub those words off so we can start to feel them, learn them, experience them, use them in a way that makes sense.
Yeah. And then when it comes to any relationship, whether it be working with the youth or whether it be in your family, with your kids, your own kids, or with your wife, your husband, your significant other, it's like there needs to be this understanding that it's different for all of us. We're walking into this with two different views of what this word means, and when we say it to each other, we have to know that it probably means something different for you than it does for me. But we're here right now. We're going to make it work so it can begin to synergize somewhere in the middle. We're going to find it. We're going to find it together.
Yeah.
And I think that's what love is. I think that's what marriage is about too. If you get down to the bottom of it, it's like, we're not coming into this thing as perfect human beings. We're coming into this as two people who really care and we do love each other, but we're going to find where we mesh so good, if it's intentional.
I think that the ability to just have patience with your communication is something that we've really lost as well, because words can sometimes get in the way of two people who really actually agree. You see that happening a lot right now. People bickering over words when really everybody wants the same thing, but some words will be stuck in the way, and then nobody has the patience to be like, okay, let me really hear what you're saying. Oh, actually, I agree with you. We were just using different words to express that. And I think that's, your idea of creating these community centers seems like the solution, where people can actually just go have a forum and really hear each other and take the time to hear each other. There's an organization that we supported, and I can't remember it. Ryan, you might be able to look it up, but they took Israelites and Palestinians, and which have been at war for I don't know how many eons, forever. And they were youth, and they took them in, and they had a week-long camp where they got to hang out and talk and do stuff that teenagers like to do. And it was really remarkable what happened, because they would leave and they would be brothers, there'd be sisters, they'd be homies at the very least at the end of that. Because at first everybody would be like, oh my gosh, here's the Muslims, here's the Jews, and now, we're supposed to be enemies. But after a little while, just playing soccer or hanging out and talking to each other and really having these kind of facilitated conversations, they're like, I don't know why I hate these people. They seem awesome. And that was like the mutuality of that experience.
And then it's very similar to one of the
Seeds of Peace.
Seeds of Peace.
Yeah.
I think I've heard of Seeds of Peace. Yeah, incredible organization. And there's one thing that we do with the kids is our flow program. And what we do is we have discussions, meaningful discussions around various different topics that relate to, where young people are at 16, 17, 18 years old, and making decisions. And in our classes, as you can imagine, are mostly young people who are from the streets, who have they're affiliated with gangs, and a lot of times they come into a room, they don't all see eye to eye, because they're from rival neighborhoods, and it could be a Latino gang, and a black gang, and they're in their room together, 15 of us. So what we do is we begin with these conversations, and then these conversations turns into writing, and not writing artistically yet. Let's just write about it. Let's write it in response to how we're receiving this information, how we're processing it. Let's write down what you're processing. And then we take those essays pretty much, and we'll convert those into poems. So now we're starting to play with it.
Yeah.
And then we take those poems and we start to turn those into raps, right? And then we start making beats in the class. And then before we even get to the mic, because there's a mic involved, these folks have been rivaling, forever in the streets. And then now here in the classroom together, they're now they're brothers, you know what I mean? And the reason why is because at the end of the day, they start to realize, man, we're the same, brother. Like we're exactly the same. Our parents are struggling the same way. I'm failing in school the same way as you are, or I have the same hopes and ambitions. I want to get to that same island you do one day. I want to have the same hope. I want to graduate. I want to, and they're like, wait, we're really the same. And it makes them a little nervous too, because they know we got to go back out there one day. We're brothers now, but we got to go back out there one day.
And there'll be pressure from other people who haven't been through that to be like, what are you doing talking to them?
Yeah.
And they'll have to hold their ground.
But they hold their ground, which is beautiful. Yeah. I've seen it so many times. They'll run into each other at different locations, and I'll hear stories about how it was that, that one brother that they met in the class while they were locked up, who was the one who broke up the tension between the two gangs. He's like, no, that's my brother. No, don't, So
that one little connection could have stopped a massive brawl or whatever that might have transpired. It's just maybe just needs one person who can see eye to eye. Yeah.
And today, there's a lot of conversation about racism, right? Like, so if we look at racism is really just the lowest vibration of otherness. We're just othering it all the way to the point to where, I'm gonna hate you for your skin, because that's all I can hate you for. There's nothing else. Like everything, like, it's the last thing I can hate you for, because your really actual body, your birthday suit, your temple, like that's the only thing I can hate you for, because it is different. It's a little couple of shades, couple of spectrums in a different direction. That's it, and that's what it is. It's just like I can't hate you any worse of just your skin, It's just ridiculous that
so absurd.
It's absurd, and that's that's the problem. We just continuously other each other. If that stopped, if there was a way to make that connection where we all can just see, look, human to human, brother to brother, sister to sister. You know what I mean? Like if we can get to this place, then we've solved most of the world's problems at that point.
That's the new earth, right?
That's the new earth.
That's the new earth. And I think there has to be these conversations and potentially even these different practices. Like I think you adding that practice of them, turning their words, which is important. That's an important part of the conversation. But then turning that into poetry, and then turning that into a rap, and then actually performing that piece with the microphone, like bringing people together through that. That's in its way its own artistic and creative ritual that they've kind of adopted and co-opted, and that you've facilitated, and that's great. But the more we can do these, in every different little way, I think that's really going to do it, because you see the humanity in somebody when you're in art, or when you're in ceremony, or when you're in even in sport, or of course in the military too as well. I have some Green Beret friends and some elite performers, like, we don't have time for racism in the squads. You know, when we're on the Navy SEALs or in the Green Berets, like what? Well, I'm going to worry about what his skin color is. I'm worried about whether you can do the job and
I can die if he's sitting there thinking about my skin color, right?
And it's this interesting thing. It's this kind of weird. It's this weird side effect of not needing to rely on everybody, which is we really actually do. You know, like we live in a cataclysmic planet. At some point, we're all going to have to come together to fight the next cataclysm. I mean, the Dark Ages were only a few millennium ago, 1.5. Mm-hmm. The Ice Ages were like a little bit farther than that. You know, there's going to be shit that's going to happen. And then we're going to look around. And at that point, where we're all freezing our tits off because it's the next ice age, we're like, oh, no, not you. I like your skin. Right. Thank God, a human.
Yeah, right.
You know, like,
exactly.
We better come together in advance of that. So I think the timing of this, as challenging as it might be, you can look at it from that purview of like, wow, this is potentially the most beautiful thing that's happened in a long time.
Also, it's a crack in the matrix, man. It's like it's a crack into, we were just, in the pandemic of COVID, and that was like heightened. And I was like, oh man, we're in a different world. Like right when that was happening, March, April, May, we were just like, the whole world was like, we'll never be the same again. This world will never be the same again. And everyone felt it innately. And then, the murder of George Floyd happened. And it was like a crack in a crack. You know what I mean? It's like, and you have this opening now that is so where there's nothing but possibility in front of us, as long as there'll always be folks who try to plug that hole and try to run an agenda, who will try to take advantage and to be opportunist around this time and try to change that in the direction they want to go. But if we people, which I'm not going to say if we people are already, we're turned on, we're on fire. I don't see anything unless it's something cataclysmic that stops this train from really creating a new space, a new place where we begin to see, human to human the way, we just talked about, where we can have these conversations and be open with it. I'm seeing more on social media right now about, people having these open conversations, seeing more open conversations than I've ever seen around race and around, Black Lives Mattering. Like it's a bit of a phenomenon,
For sure.
Moving into the second half of this year. But
I also think people sometimes get caught up in this idea of it being perfect or your way or whatever. Like it's not going to be perfect. You can't expect the whole world to operate perfectly and people not to be opportunistic, different groups, different agendas, different motivations, different people who are entrenching their beliefs, different people who are doing different things and using the kind of egoic hierarchy of, no, well, now I'm better than you for this. There's going to be a little bit of that, but let's look deeper and not get distracted. Stay focused.
Yeah,
Don't get distracted by all this bullshit. Like what's really going on? And I think your story, if you want to share it about what you witnessed and felt driving through Laguna is like a great example. Like, let's keep our eyes on this because this is the magic of what's happening. This is like the beautiful part of this thing. And like, yeah, all right, there's going to be some other bullshit, but let's focus on like the great part.
And I think this part is the unexpected part. Like I think people knew that if there was going to be another, lynching of a Black man on television somewhere in the future, in comparison to, Mike Brown or, Eric Garner, we knew it was gonna blow up again. Like it was there. Like that was in the consciousness of like, there's gonna be more uprisings for sure. Yeah. But no one expected it to be so beautifully colorful, right? Like I think that's what's so surprising, but it was because of those 8 minutes and 46 seconds, that Derek Chauvin's knee was on George Floyd's neck. It was because it was filmed in the way that it was filmed and you can see what happened. I think that you can't deny that as a human being.
No. And it makes you want to cry. It makes you want to vomit. It makes you like, you can't ignore that. You watch it and it's just, your body goes through like convulsions of disgust and rage. And I think that was it's tragedy. But then that's the catalyst from that tragedy was that it was captured in that way, so that nobody could fucking ignore that
Nobody
anymore.
can ignore it. And you saw there was no resistance. You saw he was unarmed.
Yeah.
You saw the whole thing. You saw this was bullshit.
Yep.
And opened up a floodgate, this psychic floodgate, you know what I mean? Where it was like, okay, it's time to move in and begin to have these conversations bigger. The streets began to flood with everybody. And, about a week and a half ago, I was down in Laguna Niguel, down in Laguna Beach area. And I'm driving along and got my family in the car, and I get to a corner, and literally there was about 200 people out there for a BLM protest. Signs out, screaming, hey, Black Lives Matter. And I'm like, I looked around and there was nothing but white faces everywhere. I didn't see one black face in the entire crowd. I'm like, I was like, we are in a different place now.
Yeah.
Like this is not just a one-sided conversation. Like this is folks taking charge now for their lives, and taking charge for their community, and taking charge for the world that they want to live in, in such a way that they're going to get out there and they're going to grab picket signs every single day, and they not all be black faces. You know what I'm saying? And black folks are out there strong, yes, but to turn and see like, wow, this is all of us, and seas of people. I've been out in downtown LA and at the protest in downtown LA, it just goes on like a river, just people, signs, and it's just it's a powerful expression of where we're going and how we're closing doors from the past. Are we there yet? Of course not. We're not there yet. It may be a while until we get there. But we're in.
If there is a thing.
Right. If there is a thing.
It might be that constant journey towards greater and greater equality, greater and greater awareness about the inequity of different situations. Seems to be that way with my personal life. Like every time I think I'm there, I'm like, I am there. Shit, I'm not there.
You're not there. Look around like, not quite. But we're close, right?
Yeah.
We're close.
But progress is undeniable.
Yeah, we're in the room. We're in the room right now. And that's what's important, is that we're in the room. We're having these conversations. And we may not always agree. And it's very likely we won't agree. But we're having the conversation. We're talking about it. It's dialogue. Dialogue is what leads to resolution. There's no resolution if there's silence. So unless we're talking, even though we're not agreeing, we're not going to get anywhere unless we're talking.
Yeah.
So we're having these conversations now on a big scale, to where, there's national and television, and there's the mayor of Los Angeles, who's, defunding about $150 million from the police department right now, to put into community programs and community service programs in different areas that have been completely deserts of care in the past. And that's a great start,
Explain what defunding really means, because I think there's the radical side of defunding, which is abolition of the police, which sounds like probably a bad idea. But defunding is really, it's kind of a weird word to use, because it's really not defunding, it's refunding some of the
reallocation.
Yeah, some of that money to some programs that actually, if they go as they should go, will actually incite less need for police and less need for police to actually operate in the same way that they did. So it's still solving the same problem. You put that into that kind of root cause, which is better food, better communities, better different things. You're going to have far less crime to actually deal with. Right. So it's reallocating in a way that's actually really sensible if you don't take the fully extreme position.
I think there's three conversations. So there's the conversation of, let's give more to the police, right? Let's give more, because they need more training, they need more funds to do more, to be better, for better reform. There's that conversation that's being talked about out there. There is defunding, meaning reallocation, and reallocating to different programs, bringing in better healthcare, better youth development, better all around, just better services in our community, where we can develop and even invent some new public safety ideas. And then there is the abolition, right? Because there is that whole other side. It's like, this thing was not even created for people of color in the first place. Like you go back to the roots of the police department, of the sheriff's department, you'll see it's going to be steeped in, the slave capture, right? Like it goes back that far. So folks are like, let's just rebuild that whole entire structure altogether, and meaning let's not get rid of policing. We can still have policing, but the structure that exists today it's the fabric of it itself is steeped in slavery. And
so it's almost like it's so bad, to get the argument right. It's just so bad in its own innate nature that the only real way, there's really no reform. It has to be scrapped to be actually brought forth in a new way. And that's kind of the idea that you're So
abolition is, let's not necessarily get rid of policing. Let's get rid of the existing police department, right? Like that structure of what it looks like in every single city of how it's run. When Rayshard Brooks is in the parking lot, in a drive-through, asleep in his car, why is there a armed policeman knocking on the window? He's asleep. Like that could have been a job for anyone else. If there was a different structure, there was, maybe it's, somewhere in the social work department where someone shows up and knocks on a window, and then the whole thing that happened, it escalated and then ended up him being shot and killed, 20 minutes later, right? Like all those steps, there more than likely should have even been a citizen there. What we're trying to develop here in LA right now is that when young people, not just young people, but when folks get pulled over or when there's altercations that are nonviolent and where folks are unarmed, that citizens show up to be just there, just witnesses. Social workers show up, when there's, some relationship or domestic problems. There's us concerned citizens that are also in the mix to ensure and to also be witness to what happens. Like those are things that are going to develop faster or sooner than later. But the abolition idea itself is just let's rethink this whole structure. Let's just rethink it. And let's get back to peace officers, right? Because that's what's absent for a lot of people.
Yeah. And
some people have never seen an officer as a peace officer ever. I remember growing up and I remember just driving down the street and just fearing the police. I mean, there's times I still fear the police now, but when I was a kid, I got my boys in the car, we're driving. What's the first thing that you do when you see a cop? You take off your hat, you sit up straight, you put on your seatbelt, you act white. You know what I mean? Like that was the mentality. Like just sit up straight. What is that? Like what is that we have to stop being ourselves in order to disguise and put on this sort of different aura to be able to survive the next moment. Right?
It's a symptom of a corrupt system, a system that's in need of change. And I think these, having these conversations are essential. And I think this is, my prayer is, again, that people just have the patience to have these conversations. Absolutely. Because you'll get lost in like an initial blush reaction. And even the intricacies of what abolition actually meant, no one's sat down to really explain that to me. It's just like you say it and then all of a sudden polarization, boom, polarization. Yeah. And then there's also people who will say like, oh, well, you can't talk about this. If I wanted to talk about it, well, you don't have a right to talk about this. Well, how am I going to have any part of this? I'm part of this community too. Yeah. Like police are the ones that pulled me out of the wreckage of my car when I crashed it. They were the ones, if they weren't out there on the streets, I don't know if I'd be here living. So they don't do only bad things. Right. So we need some people, different some form, yeah. Something has to come and replace it. So let's talk about what these other solutions could be and let's get everybody on board with it.
And I said, I don't think anyone's thinking to just erase public safety, right? Like, or policing in a sense, right? I think when people say abolition or even defund, none of that includes just folks, just, anarchy everywhere, right? Where no one arrives, there's no first responders that show up when things happen, right? Mm-hmm. Like, so I believe it's just the structure that folks know it now in the communities that they're in, it doesn't work. It's a surveillance system. It's an over-policing system for a lot of people. It's also just a gateway into incarceration. It's not seen as a positive. You call the police, they don't show up for 15, 20, 30 minutes. Sometimes, even if they show up at all. So it is a different reality.
They're not serving, they're not protecting.
Right.
They're punishing and incarcerating, which also speaks to the flaws of our whole justice system, which is, I know, something else that you're passionate about. Yeah. It's like, it's not only this one thing, this is one arm of a very broken fucking system.
Exactly. It's all part of the same. Healthcare goes in, it all just sort of collapses into this area of law enforcement, of just justice altogether, that needs to be rethought and reimagined.
So, all right, I'm going to give you the opportunity to imagine you are a genie. Okay. You got all the powers. And Will Smith has freed you.
All right.
And you have your own wishes. You don't need to work for anybody. You're your own genie.
Okay.
Empowered to do whatever. What are some of the changes that you would like to see? I mean, obviously you have limited purview, and you'd have councils, and you'd have different voices, and you're so good about reaching out to the communities and listening and hearing and all the communities. I mean, I would appoint you to be this. This is why I'm asking. Like, if I could say, like, who do I want to be the free genie of the world? I'd be like, all right, Harry, I'm in. Like, I'll cast my vote. But what are some of the things that you would like to see?
Yeah, I think just taking steps, the first thing I like to see is I'd like to see that there is a place and a space for people to feel like they're heard, and where they can express and they can share their concerns, where those concerns are collected and then discussed with the community, not outside the community, but it's all done together. First of all, because we got to know the need. The first thing to know is to know what's the core need, and when you get down to the bottom of it, it's more than anything, it's economics, right? We need to know, where are we missing it with economics, in poverty, because poverty is real, and on Maslow's hierarchy of need, survival is at the bottom rung. If people can't get past just, where am I going to have my next meal, then they can't get to the next place of like, oh, well, let me think about school, let me think about advancing in my career, or let alone let me think about how I'm going to spiritually really get tuned in with myself and really find what I really want to do with my life. So you gotta, like, food is key. Food, shelter, clothing, community. Those are key. So, I don't know I don't know what the number is, but I believe the number was somewhere around $1.2 billion to get most of the folks who are homeless here in LA, at least a proper place to sleep at night. It's something like that. A statistic that I heard a couple years ago. And not that everybody wants to get off the street either. Like, that's a whole other conversation. People want to get the homeless off the street. Not everybody that's homeless wants to be off the street. A lot of people chose that because they were like, I'm jumping ship from this rat race, from this matrix that has me really just, tied up. So the first thing I would do would be to create, a space, a forum for voices to really be heard and communicated. Just
real quick, I mean, 1.2 billion might sound like a lot pre-COVID, but we just made a couple $1 trillion appear out of nowhere.
Right.
You talk about some genie shit. You're like, alakazam, abracadabra, $2 trillion. Here you go. Like, what? You had $2 trillion? You know how much it would cost to feed the world? Like 250 billion. You had $2 trillion just chilling? Like, that's fucked up.
And where does that go? I mean, back into somebody else's pockets that's going to go ahead and drain the economy even more.
Yeah.
Right? That's where we're at. $2 trillion out of nowhere, like, just showed up. I didn't know we even had $2 trillion to like give out.
Really? like that's what I'm saying. Like
where the hell did $2 trillion
you had $2 trillion just available?
I had no idea.
Everybody's talking about all these different things. Like, there's resources. There's far more resources and I think that's the thing that we need to remember in this new earth that we're all trying to build. Like, there's way more resources than we imagine. We just have to, that clicked enough fear knobs for people and people were afraid who had the power that they were like, okay, yeah, we'll just make $2 trillion. Like, Okay. All right. Well, this is now the reality that you've shown us is a reality that this is possible. So
we're gonna be knocking.
billion,
We're gonna be knocking
sure.
that door for sure. If we
For
can do
sure.
that, we're gonna be doing this, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and so I think, you know, going back into just making sure everybody's taken care of, as far as farms to tables. And I don't mean farm to a restaurant table. I mean farm to table homes, you know, where people are getting fresh food. You know, how can we connect? We see what's going on in our agriculture right now, and farms are, you know, they can't provide for restaurants because restaurants are closing. There's a big dilemma right now between farming and how we've distributed food in the past. But what if we had better ways to get food to people? Just get them to people. There's so much surplus at the end of the day that these farms have. How can we just make sure that these food deserts that we have in our major cities and all around the country, for that matter, how can we make sure that that food still gets to people? You know, every single year.
When you were talking about one of the programs that you have where you're taking kids and bringing them out to the farms and like letting them pick the food and then bringing them to these, you know, basically little farmers markets that you're setting up in the community that's providing food. That model is so fucking powerful, you know, for so many different reasons. For one, because this gives people a real sense of purpose. That same driving, fueling purpose that's allowed you to be the man that you are now, they're going to get a little taste of that because they're going to know that every time they pick something, it's meaningful because it's going to fill somebody else's belly.
That's right.
You
it's
know?
that full service. It's that full circle service, right? It's that holistic service, you know, from the root to someone's table, right? And how that feels, you know, and how that fulfills you of doing such a powerful such a powerful service in that way, you know. You know, I was watching a couple of the young people today while we had our pop-up market in Culver City today, you know, walking groceries out. And these are free groceries that we give to the community every single week, you know, and there's an abundance. Like, it's not like, oh, just pick, we've got a lot, right? We load up the shop, man, and people come in, they're walking out with 2, 3, 4 bags of just free groceries, you know, fresh produce, organic produce, you know, and one of the young men, he was walking out and I see him, he's got 2 bags on each side. He's so happy.
Yeah.
And you know why he's happy is because half of those groceries were groceries that he harvested, you know, and that's what's powerful, you know, and this is a young man who just 6 months ago was sitting incarcerated, you know what I mean? Not knowing what he's going to do with his life next. Now, you know, he's out there and he's helping the community. When I'm looking at this glow that's occurring in this, there's something there. And I want to just go back to that. There's something there. When these moments where they're so inspired and you see life come into someone who had no hope before and you just see it, it's just there. You're like, all right, how do we make sure that continues to flow into that person? And how can we teach them how to charge that for themselves? Like, how can we just, you know what I mean? And that's what it's all about. And that's what the community needs more than anything right now. Mm-hmm. They need people that are going to show them. You know, there's people walking around that are in their bubbles. They're just like, I didn't know all this was, I didn't know the problem. They were in their bubbles. You know why? Because their cup flowed over so much that it overflowed and it created a bubble. Now, when your cup overflows that much, it is your duty as a human being to look around you and say, who can I help? Who can I give to? Who can I serve? Who can I give a piece of my privilege to in some form or fashion? And if we all thought about that, and did that, that'd be incredible. It's just those little tiny things that changes people's lives. I remember a moment when I played football I played college football, and there was a time where I didn't eat, man, for like a week. I didn't have any money. I was on a partial scholarship. My parents, they thought I should figure it out, and I was on the sidelines, and the coach walked over to me, and he's looking at me, and I'm crying. I've got tears running from my face, and I'm on the sidelines, and they're playing plays, and everything's happening. And he walks over, he says, "What's up, Harry? What's going on?" I said, "Coach, man, I'm hungry." He said, "Yeah, I'm hungry too. We're going to kick some ass this Saturday, man. I'm hungry too. Let's get out there." I said, "No, Coach. Man, I'm hungry. Like, I haven't eaten all week. I'm hungry." He's like, "Wait, you haven't eaten all week? Why not?" I So I've been out of money, He says, well, I'll take you to dinner after practice. So after practice, we get in his car. He takes me to one of the finest establishments out there, Burger King, and I'm sitting there and I'm eating my Whopper, and I'm chomping this Whopper, and I'm like eating like a pig, like a monster. And he looks over to me and he says, Harry, slow down. Slow down. He says, I understand where you're at. I've been there before. He said, I'm going to tell you something that you probably won't believe. This does not last forever. That's all he said to me. Because when you're that age and you're in that spot, you think it's all coming down. You can't see past tomorrow. You just think that my life is hell, it's shit, it's going. And when he looked at me in my eyes and he said, this will not last forever, it was this, like, really? This isn't gonna last forever. Wow. Like the whole room opened up for me. And I was 18 years old.
Hope.
Yep. And it's all that people need. So, in the creation and in the thought of what would I develop, it'd be hope machines everywhere, man.
Yeah. Because hope is essential for meaning. Like you have to have meaning, you have to have something that's personally meaningful to you, but that you also believe that you can affect change. Yeah. That's why being of service to others is so helpful. Sometimes it feels like there's nothing we can do for ourselves, but you'd be hard pressed to say that there's nothing you can do to help somebody else.
That's right.
And that's going to fulfill you so much more than any of these other things you think are going to fulfill you, like that new pair of clothes or those new shoes. Absolutely. Like you got 2 minutes of enjoyment out of that shit.
With hope, you can see 20 new pair of shoes. You know what I mean? It's like that one. Exactly. Like hope, you're like, oh man, wow, I can do this. I can do this. You're energized by that. Our this country is so individualistic. It's all about you. Go. You got to make it. You got to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Well, some people don't even have bootstraps. You know what I mean?
They don't even have boots.
They don't even have boots. Martin Luther King said that. They don't even have boots. And it's like, how do we expect folks who have never had boots to what? Make the boot? We have to look at how do we serve each other in this process and get out of the individualistic, you got to do it yourself, or you got to pull yourself up, or no handouts. I hear this all the time, but some folks just don't have the tools yet. When they get those tools, it's a whole other story. Those people usually have fire burning inside of them. And when that tool comes, they're taking off and they're amazing and they're bright and they're shining everywhere and everybody's receiving their rays, But they need those tools to do it. And when they finally get those tools, but for folks like you and I and others, everyone has to give hope and has to give a piece of what we've gotten on our path and our journey, in the walk down the path,
That idea, it's so much harder to get from 0 to 1 than from, 1 to 2 and then from 2 to 4. And then it's just, so much easier once you have like a little bit of momentum. But again, there's these dangerous and insidious stories, the stories of the welfare state. Stories, if you give someone something, then they don't care about it. Like, okay, there may be some people where that's the case. They're just happy to be on the dole and they're happy to do. But for every one of those, there's a bunch of people who just need the boots. Yeah. Just need the boots, and then they'll make the straps, and then they'll start pulling, and then they'll start going. And for me, like, I recognize I didn't start at 0. I didn't even start at 1. I probably started at 10. I had from 4 amazing mentors from my parents. My parents split when I was 2. So I had dad, stepdad, mom, stepmom, all awesome, all like teaching me different things, opportunities everywhere. So I felt that pressure for myself. That's my privilege. So I felt the pressure like, man, I better do something fucking great because I'm not starting at 0. Like, it's not okay for me to just be okay. Yeah. Like, I started at 10. Like, I got to get to 1,000, or whatever this thing. I'm not, there's no numbers to it, but I got to do something really, really special because I've been gifted and privileged in so many fucking ways, So it's like, those are the ideas where you just say, all right, yeah, sure. All right, this is my privilege. What am I going to do with it? Yeah. Like, what am I going to do with it? How am I going to funnel this into something great? How can I help other people who have less? And, these are the things that I think people need to see instead of people throwing that like a tomato at somebody. Privilege.
Yeah.
Well, have you sat down and had a conversation about how they feel and like whether they feel like they're doing enough or whether they even know what to do or what's blocking them or how they don't feel enough love for people, or maybe there's some lost in somewhere of otherness, maybe not quite racism, but still in this otherness paradigm that's keeping them from caring?
A lot of times it's the American way. I'm an individual. I worked for mine. Like and that is how this country shaped everyone. I mean, we were, the wild, wild west, the great frontier. These were about folks going out and getting what they need and making a living and having enough for their families. And it wasn't necessarily communal like it was in Europe, right? Where folks were sharing a lot more. This was about coming and establishing. And so here in this country, we get into that place where everyone's trying to own that house, get that car, have their piece of the real estate, have their piece of the American pie. And in that process of owning and possessing the American pie, there's a sense of pride that rises up. And this is hard work. And this is, and to a point where no, they're not racist, or they're not, they're just at a place of like, I'm good. I'm here. I'm good. Someone else can help those people, and that's kind of what some of the mentality is. They're going to pull themselves up, or they don't. Too bad. They need to get on track. They need to, get on the road and begin to make some things happen for themselves, like I did when I was, such and such age, right? Like people begin to think that way, and blaming people for why they're not where they are, right? And saying, if you would have done it what I would have done at that age, then you'd be up here where I am right now. There's a lot of that going on. There's these conversations. And so the conversation hopefully needs to shift just a little bit to a conversation where we begin to look around and say, you know what, maybe everyone didn't have the same tools. Maybe everyone didn't have the same footing. Maybe everyone, didn't have the same opportunities when buying a house because of redlining, which still exists, but not in a legal form, right? Like, but people being denied for, real estate or buying a home because of the color of your skin still occurs today. It's not something that's gone away. The young girl at our office yesterday said that, she was offered a job at a restaurant yesterday with a friend of ours, and she was so happy about it. She's like, wow, I finally got a job. It's the first time someone didn't turn me down because of my name. She had a very ethnic name. So she was being turned down for jobs because, her name was an ethnic name. And that's one of those freakonomics out there, right? So it's kind of like at that point, it's like, what do? We begin to just have these conversations that are really important.
It's, I think people understanding that the same amount of work, you take two individuals, someone's starting at 0, someone's starting at 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, whatever your starting point is, like the same amount of effort will yield dramatically different results. It's, I think, called the Pareto principle in economics, whereas once you have a certain amount of momentum, it's so much easier to accumulate more and more momentum. So if effort and work ethic is like a fixed amount, let's say that's at 100 for two different individuals, but someone starting at 2 versus someone starting at 0, the person starting at 2 is going to be exponentially farther ahead than the person starting at 0 with work ethic being 100 in both cases.
Yeah.
Like that's just fucking reality.
Yeah, just reality.
That's just reality. So like,
that's physics. It's science.
But instead we have this myth, like, well, if they would have worked as hard as I did, okay, well, they would have, probably, and there's also random effects. Sometimes people, it's like a game of chutes and ladders, right? Sometimes you get the chute and you go down a few notches and shit just gets fucking, you get whatever.
You get spun around
for a little while. Sometimes you get a ladder, someone that finds you and, pulls you up, or you get an opportunity that there's some luck involved in this. So it's not actually like you have to look at this in the aggregate, but people just really recognizing like the same amount of work is not going to produce the same result. And that's just a total fucking myth.
Right.
And like, that's the foundation of privilege, to just understand that I can work the same amount as somebody else, but because of my starting position, I'm going to get exponentially farther. So what does that mean? That means I better do some shit to give back.
That's right.
If I really love the people in the same way. And all these other things are just justifications for not doing something.
Yeah, that's right. And in the process, teaching people how to fish, right? Like teaching people,
Of course,
how to,
because that gives them meaning too.
That gives them meaning in teaching them how to fish, teaching them how to, pick up books. Like it was writing and it was reading. Like when I mean writing, it was poetry. Like that my poems became my own Bible. Like I was discovering so much about myself that I would go back and read them just to tell myself about some things that will happen in the future. Like, oh, this happened. I'm tracking now. I'm tracking what happens in my life around this time of year or with this relationship, and this is what goes on. I'm able to use this, but writing was a big one for me. And then just picking up amazing books and how much just began to just drop in and begin to make sense for me. Like these weren't things that I did when I was a kid, but teaching folks how to get to this place where they can begin to know where to go to get those resources, where they can go to find the right books and to learn in that way, I think would be important in the future.
So, all right. So we're still building this. We're still building this society.
Okay.
And so what we got now is we have people having conversations, and that's an essential part. Something that we established, communities that are holding conversations. And it seems to me, just like Seeds of Peace is doing, we got to get conversations in a bunch of different communities where different communities are reaching and talking to other communities as well. So, people can have those stories, those visceral stories. Like if you sat down and you were in a community center and you had those tears in your eyes that you showed your coach, in another center, and they're like, wow, there's people who really can't afford Burger King. It would blow some people's minds, and they'd be like, fuck, well, we got to do something, and just that one thing, just having that conversation, just sitting down and like having that conversation might change perspectives dramatically. So we got that. We got serving people food. We got the ability to, give people access to pulling food out of the ground, being of service, having meaning, teaching them to fish. Sounds like we need books available. Books available, all the classics, just those are free.
Yeah.
Those are free from now on. Whatever, pay all of the rights to whoever owns whatever those things that may still be lingering. Like, we'll cover that. Now these books are free for everybody.
Audible is free.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like, you want to read? You want to learn?
Yeah.
That shit's free now.
Yeah.
Like, here we go. And so there's like all these things. And an idea that I had earlier is, instead of planting just completely aesthetically pleasing plants and bushes and trees, how about instead of all the palm trees, we plant avocado trees?
That'd be amazing.
Just avocado trees
everywhere, like lined up everywhere. Just walk down the street. Boop,
imagine if you had that when you were playing ball.
Man,
you just knew that you
knew you were gonna eat no matter what.
you knew you were gonna eat.
Whatever. I'm gonna make a salad. If anything, I'll have a salad tonight, right? And that'd have been incredible to line the streets with that.
Yeah.
Why can't we do that? I mean, we were lining the streets with these sort of fake trees all day anyway. So why not have trees where people are nourished up and down their street, aligned on their street? That would be incredible.
So we got some good like foundational starting points. Yeah. And then how do you handle things like criminal justice in its totality?
Well, I think we just have to shift the narrative. Like, it's all wrapped up in narrative. We got to shift the understanding of who the people are that we're locking up. We tend to think that, if someone's incarcerated, and they're, a criminal, and a criminal has that label in itself is so heavy, it's so loaded, so misunderstood. So we need to begin to rip, but also just shed away this label from people who get incarcerated or who are caught up in the criminal justice system. The young people that I work with, some of the most gentle, lighthearted human beings I've ever met. And a lot of times they're locked up, and folks don't know, a lot of times young kids are locked up for not even doing real crimes, right? So sometimes they're locked up for violating their probation terms, and that could be anything from, being out after curfew. That could be also just, missing your probation appointments. That could be not going to school. I mean, there's various different reasons why someone breaks their probation terms.
Didn't you had a stat in your TED Talk that 70% of the kids that are in there for technical violations from some kind of probation violation?
Right. So
crazy.
That's crazy. So from technical violations, and that's not just here in Los Angeles, that's across the country what you're finding. These things are quickly changing because there's a lot of loud people out there right now making things change. Los Angeles was and still is the largest incarcerator of children in the world, in the entire world. And even though it's decreased greatly over the last 10 years because there's been a lot of us out there really loud about it, closing the youth detention facilities, lessening who goes in and really being sticklers on, these probation violations thing. There's still the largest incarcerator. There's still the more kids in this system here in LA than there is anywhere else in the country, anywhere else in the world.
Wow.
But those reasons are, when kids get locked up, it's because you violated your probation terms. It happens, and it's happened for millennia. Los Angeles is the oldest probation department in the world. In 1903, it was founded, and from that point on, it was all about, hey, we're going to put in some discipline and punishment. They're going to make kids turn their lives around. And over the last 30 years, it reached its height. And the biggest budget, to lock up a young person in LA cost taxpayers $400,000, and like I said, for technical violations, right? So we're looking at, young people are going in, we're getting our pockets drained for what's not even a crime. People don't really understand who these kids really are and what's possible. They're not criminals. They're in a system that's there to sort of capitalize on them in a lot of ways.
And what's dangerous too beyond that is you label someone a criminal unjustly. It's called the Pygmalion effect. You're actually projecting something onto them that they don't deserve, and that's going to create oftentimes the reaction of like, oh yeah, you think I'm a criminal? I'll show you a fucking criminal. Right. Like, that's what everybody thinks I am? Like, I'll be that. And you end up actually creating the thing that you're trying to.
Yeah, they go out and act that out.
Yeah, they're like, well, I'm already being locked up for this bullshit.
Right.
And you gave an example in your TED Talk of a kid whose mother died, 19-year-old kid whose mother had died, and he was smoking cannabis, which was in the unapproved, inebriants that we've had. Fortunately, that's changing now, and he was locked up again.
He took a piss test.
Took a piss test, dealing with the grief of his mother dying, smoking some cannabis.
In violation of probation, he's back in. And that becomes a cycle. And then they're there. And it just continues on and on and on. We got to break that. Michelle Alexander in her book, The New Jim Crow, says that there's more black men incarcerated right now than there were enslaved in 1850. So we have to break away.
Break the wheel.
We have to break that wheel and have to get back on track. That's the first thing. And it's not just law enforcement. Law enforcement's like sort of the end of the pole there. Like this goes all the way back up to the judges. I mean, it goes back up all the way into just our laws in general, federal laws. But
every way from the written word on down to the people executing it at every different level, to the people who are profiting and profiteering from these fucking unjust and ridiculous and unproductive laws as well. The prison industrial complex. I mean, that $400,000, there's a lot of profit. There's a lot of profit stacked into that.
I did a big talk in Santa Barbara a couple of years ago, and after the talk, I was standing in the courtyard, and I'd given the stat of back then it wasn't quite 400,000. Back then it was only 200,000. And I said, and he said, and there was this gentleman who was standing at the other end of the crowd, and he's just waiting for everybody to clear out so he can have a conversation with me. And then he walks over to me after everyone walked away, and he says, "Hey, pretty good up there. You know your stats pretty well. Do you know why it costs $200,000 to incarcerate a young person for a year?" I said, "No, inform me." He said, "Well, I'm a former probation officer, a former probation deputy director of the probation department." He says, 30 years ago, 1985, there was the war on drugs. During that time, LA County, LAPD, probation department, they all bolstered up and they became huge. That's when they, I don't know how many, they hired thousands and thousands of more staff during that time. And they were just hitting the streets, locking up anybody that had drugs on them, smelled like drugs. It doesn't matter. You know what I mean? You're getting locked up. And that went on for a long time. Well, within the last 10 years, like I mentioned earlier, we're starting to get that decrease happening, where there's a lot of activists out there that are making sure that we change these laws and that folks aren't recidivating because of these violations. And so he says, well, there's that 30-year stint right there of, and now it's backing up. But at the same time, the cost for incarcerating folks are going up. It's still fewer people there. They're not firing, people. We're not lessening the force. And he said, well, the reason why is because what happens to a person after 30 years on the job? I said, well, what happens to a person after 30 years on the job? He says they retire. So even though the population's going down, even though these things are happening, they still have to lock folks up because they have to pay for these pensions of these folks that are leaving the force. And I said, wow. So because it's just a machine that needs to be fed.
And the machine will always propagate. They'll find some justification, some excuse to just propagate and feed itself because it wants to survive. Everybody wants their job, so they'll look the other way. I mean, I think it's the same with the pharmaceutical industrial complex, right? Yeah. Like it's just, we'll put this thing out. Well, we need a job and we're going to work here and we need this. Like everybody they're so ready to just turn the eye and be like, well, I mean, I got to eat, I got to handle my shit. So, so whatever. But that's the fucking problem is because these things have momentum and it sounds like they need to be radically more fluid.
Well, like one of the visions I have is that, we just move it into something else, like you take the probation department, for example. It's a $1 billion budget here in Los Angeles. 70% of who they supervise are youth and our kids, and kids are, there's fewer kids in there today, but you have this department that really doesn't serve a great purpose whatsoever. It's there. It eats up a lot of our taxpayer dollars. They're being pulled out of the schools. And so schools are complaining saying, hey, we need our probation officers back because there was a person of fear, on campus basically. And then that helped the environment, but they're not needed there. You don't need cops on campuses no matter what. What if we would reimagine a new department, a department of mentorship, where we begin to close out and defund probation, and we begin to refund it with mentors. We take most of the probation officers I know on the line in juvenile hall or on the streets on the line are folks that really do care. I know a lot of them. They really do care. They show up at our center to visit kids, and they're there. They care. The kids tell me that they care, But the machine itself is not one that does. So if we would develop a new department of mentorship, retrain folks, get folks in there, and then we can have more. There'd be much more close care happening with a mentor rather than your probation officer who carries a gun and a badge, right? You'd be more willing to have a conversation and sit down like, hey, I'm having these struggles, in my life, or I need help getting, these documents for, legalization, or I need, these particular, I need to get my driver's license or something. Or folks that just were there as, accompanying them through their journey more often, because probation is supposed to be something like that, but it doesn't show up like that for most of the people.
No. This is obviously this is blossoming into such a wide conversation. I want to continue having it. We might have to save some of it for part 2, but it really seems like there just needs to be a lot more fluidity. All of these structures that seem firm and rigid because of funding and everybody vying for their own funding and everybody warping stories around it. Like the police force should be able to fluctuate up and down, whatever policing force this evolves into becoming. should be able to fluctuate up and down depending on the amount of crime that's actually there. Not trying to create more crime with quotas and different situations and different harassments to fund the cities with more money, because the cities are starving for money and they can't, support their education unless they incarcerate people because they get paid through the courts or give speeding. Like the whole thing is kind of fucked. Yeah. Where it's like everybody's just trying to feed more money into the situation where things should be able to flow. And the goal should be that we need way less cops because there's way less crime. Yeah. There's just way less. And that's great. But there's so many structures that would have to have some fluidity and have some ability to kind of bend and have some support so that it can, if the probation offices need to go away and if these police precincts needed to go away because there wasn't enough crime, they wouldn't fight to create more. It'd be like, okay, great. We did our job. Perfect. We need less of us. Fantastic. The society, it's just having this global perspective of like, wow, the society is healthy right now. And then the society could support those other things to continue supporting a healthy society. Yeah. It's just not the way it is now.
Well, and these should be the conversations, right? Like there should be a conversation. I think we've started these conversations, but there should be a conversation. How are we reimagining this? There's millions of people that say it doesn't work, and they're Americans. They live on this soil. They say it does not work for them in their neighborhoods, and if they're hurt by it and they're, and they're afflicted by what's happening in their communities, how do we reimagine it? How do we have this conversation? How do we bring it into where, the policing system and the folks that police those neighborhoods are folks that are from those neighborhoods, that know those neighborhoods, go to the church in those neighborhoods, went to school in those neighborhoods, know those people. I guarantee you the person that shot Rayshard Brooks probably did not go to that, didn't even know the neighborhood. It wasn't from that neighborhood, and shows up and it's just like, you don't know Ray, you know Ray, you know what I mean? Like, like that's just Ray, like
he gets sleepy after lunch.
He gets sleepy after lunch. That's why he's in the Wendy's, man. He's trying to soak up the liquor, man. Come on, And now, if he would have known that, there would have been a different situation. It would have been, hey, let me give you a ride. Let me, walk you home or whatever. We've been sitting here for 30 minutes. I don't need a breathalyzer test. I see you're drunk, bro. Let me just, let's hop in the car. There could have been a different conversation. Yeah. And I think that's what folks want. I think that's what folks want. I think at the end of the day, it's not necessarily, public safety and, this, someone there to be a peace officer. That's a problem. The problem is just just what comes with it, just what's historically what has been in those neighborhoods with the badge and a gun, that folks need to change that up because it hasn't been pleasant for many, many, many people, and there's just a desire to move it in a different direction.
A need.
Yeah.
A need. It must.
Yeah.
It must. What would you say as we close this out? I know, there's a lot of people we've been talking about the importance of conversations. There's a lot of people who feel afraid to have any conversation right now because things are it's so volatile. You put out an idea or a thought and no matter what it is, you could literally put out a heart and say love and someone would be like, fuck you, like we don't need love right now. And you're like, shit, all right, no love. Like, okay. Like, it's a difficult time to have a conversation. So what would be your advice? And this goes for every different belief, every different race, every different side that you may be on. What would be your advice for, facilitating conversation? And also if you have any advice for people to have the courage to keep speaking.
Yeah. So, the advice I would give is that this is really a good time to listen. Mm-hmm. However long it takes to listen, this is a good time to listen. And so let's do that, but let's also not be silent, in the listening. Mm-hmm. Let's be sure to speak from the heart, speak from that proper place, try to have intellectual conversations as much as possible. Folks have been asking me, what do I say to my kids? I get that question a lot. What do I say to my kids? How do I teach my kids, about racism? And I'm mm-hmm. like, well, you got to maybe teach yourself first. Mm-hmm. you may want to explore and read. The information's out there. This isn't a brand new topic, so it's pretty bountiful where you can turn first. There's films, there's books, there's everything. Teach yourself, learn, have conversations, discuss it, be open to learning about it, and then, have those conversations with your kids at the same time. The people that need to speak, this is the time to speak, period. Like if you know you need to be speaking and folks know who they are, when you do, or when it arises and you're like, oh damn, I need to speak now, like don't push that down. Go into that, like lean into being loud and being vocal and being a voice for what's important right now.
Even if that means you take some arrows.
Yeah, you're gonna take arrows.
You're gonna take arrows,
brother. I got.
You got 7 quivers.
I got arrows. I got wounds, man.
It's like you stormed the elven castle.
That's it, man. It's like, but you gotta keep going. Yeah. I've been shot so many times in situations, and I've had my imposter syndrome popping up all the time, all over the place. Boop, 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 boop. Mm-hmm. You're not worth it. You're not, you're not good enough. No one wants to hear you. Da, da, da. But I gotta stand in what I believe in and stand in my stand. And that's an internal stand. That's not an external stand. It's an internal stand. And begin to just continue to speak for the people. Because I don't just speak for myself. I speak for everyone that I bring with me, whether they are visible or invisible, that has brought me to this point to be able to speak out loud and to give the message that the world needs to hear at this time, And at the end of the day, what is that message? That message is love. That word is the word I'm going to use. People get tired of it every day. They can say, oh, that word is worn out. It doesn't matter. It's still real. It's still It's still the only thing. We can't replace it. We can't give it a nickname. We can't give it a nickname, but it's still what it is.
Yeah.
And as long as we're coming from that place of presence and love with others, we're going to find ourselves in a brand new place, a new world.
No doubt. Well, this is one of the most inspiring conversations I've had in a long time, man. I just appreciate
Aubrey,
you so much.
Thank you, man, for having me.
Yeah,
here,
for sure. I'm fucking fired up. Like it's not usually like I feel like I'm fucking fired up. This is beautiful, man.
Yeah,
really beautiful. How can people support what you have going on with New Earth?
Yeah, so I mean, we are really, really, really heavily supporting the community with food aid. There's families that just don't have it. There's folks there's still 40 million people unemployed in this country pretty much, and that need services and food and resources. So we've opened up our center a couple of days a week, giving away free groceries every single week. So fresh produce, mostly organic, at our center, and we have abundance of it. So people can show up. We're New Earth. You can go to newearthlife.org. Is our website, and we're in Culver City. We also, are consistently and constantly moving to change things. So we're and what I mean by change things is that our center is going to be multiplying in a second. We're going to be moving more centers. I'm looking at more locally grown, locally sourced produce. Locations that we can begin to pop up within our communities to begin to sort of take care of this food desert that is happening. And as we talked about earlier, the food and the mind are hand in hand, the two brains, so we're looking to do that so people can come and support. I mean, we need volunteers all the time, you can find all that out on our website, they can donate. We have that on our website as well. And you can go to myharrygrammer.com. Want to talk to me personally, you can just hit me up on there. But that's it. That's what's going on.
Beautiful, man.
Yeah, brother.
Well, avocado tree planting initiative.
Come on, man.
I'm in.
Let's do it.
I'm all the way in.
Let's do it. Let's go, Aubrey.
I appreciate you, brother. Thank you, man. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. So much love. Peace.
Peace.
If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to subscribe. Also, share with any friend that you think might benefit from it. And lastly, go to aubreymarcus.com, sign up for my newsletter diary, and you won't miss a thing.